Welcome to this special 2024 election coverage episode of Kankakee Podcast. I'm Jake Lamore. Before we get started, just to remind you that early voting is now underway if you choose to cast your ballot before November 5th. For more voter information, you can visit KankakeeCountyClerk.com. On this episode, I'll be speaking with Billy Morgan, a candidate running for Illinois State Representative for the 79th District. Billy has held various roles in public service, including Monee Township Trustee and Vice President of the Monee Historical Society. He has been included in community efforts such as the Campaign to Save Local Schools and is focused on addressing key issues like the economy, education, public safety, and reproductive rights. Let's hear more about his platform and what he hopes to bring to the 79th District if elected. So, Billy, I just want to say welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. It's good to have you here. So I think we met earlier this year. I can't remember where in the world we were at, but we met, had a great exchange.
Had some rhubarb.
Was it at the Rhubarb Festival?
Yeah, it was.
Was that the first time? See, because I remember that. But I couldn't remember if that was the first time or not. But that was in May, and now we're recording this in October. Mm-hmm. So, I guess that would have been after the primary.
Yeah, it was after the primary and very shortly before the pie eating contest.
Yes, that's right. Oh my gosh, the pie eating. You should have participated in that.
I should have.
That would have been really good for your campaign.
In retrospect, man, I don't know how I would have done, but there were some pros there. They had style. They had, They had plans on how they were going to do it. I don't know if you noticed that.
Right. Each one had...
There's training.
There is training involved, and each one kind of had their own take on how they were doing it. And then some were just they were just winging it. They had no idea. Speaking of food, though, that actually leads me into, I'm going to call this our little icebreaker question. So, we've got a Facebook group for the podcast. And if you're just now hearing about that, by the way, you should enter or join the podcast group if you're an avid listener, because I do like to interact with people and ask them questions. So Cole Pilbean asked, because I told people that you were going to be on the podcast, we were going to get to know Billy, and I said, if you guys have any questions for him, let me know. I'll see if I can get some of those in. And Cole asked, you wanted to know what your favorite food was. So talking about rhubarb, it made me think of that. And I thought, what a question to ask. We got someone who's running for office and want to know what their favorite food is. And I'm like, I can respect that. It's simple, but also just, I like it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so what's your favorite food?
It's pretty bad. Lately, I've been eating almost all burritos.
What kind of burritos? Are they from restaurants? Are they the frozen ones?
Not the frozen ones,
okay.
Thankfully.
So you're up here.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
You're not... Yeah.
Well, I mean, I got to say, it's really hard for me to drive past a Chipotle without driving in. But,
it's a good thing they don't have drive-thrus.
It really is. It really is.
I think they did that for a reason.
My wife is Mexican. Okay. And she was born in the United States, but Spanish was her first language. And when
she first generation born here?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. And so she was born here, and then about a month later, they ended up moving back to Mexico City.
Oh, wow.
And so she grew up on all of the Mexican foods, and it's when I got to know her mom did not know how to deal with me. And so she would come up to me and she'd go, "Do you like this kind of food?" "Well, yes." "Do you like this kind of food?" "Yes." "Do you like this kind of food?" So I didn't realize why she was asking. And at the end of the litany of questions, I would have a torta that just had all of the things I said I liked in it, all stacked on top of one another.
And you're probably thinking well, I don't normally mix all these things together.
I didn't realize that they were going to be
that you're going to be
in
eating
a pile.
This in one thing.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So what was that? What was that mix of all the things?
Oh my gosh.
On the torta?
There'd be broccoli and cauliflower, and there'd be all kinds of different cheeses. Do you like this kind of cheese? Do you like this kind of cheese? Now, given that they're from Mexico, they don't believe in yellow cheeses. It's all white cheeses.
Yes.
And so, I'm really lucky in that I get real Mexican food at home.
Man, spoiled.
I am. I really am. But, you can go to another place that's not real Mexican food, and it's still good. That it's not real.
Yeah, right.
But it's
American Mexican, right? Is that what we would call it?
Right.
Yeah.
It's been fast foodized.
Yes, right. It has to go through that whole process of being easy to make and devour and all that.
And it's funny that I say burritos too is like my lead in, because in Mexico they don't really do burritos. That's not
that's more of an American thing. Yeah. Or is that Tex-Mex maybe? I don't know exactly what region it comes from. But yeah, you're right. I forgot about that. That is more of an Americanized.
Leave it to us to just put all the food in a big bundle and package it together.
We're introduced to Mexican food and we were just thinking about hamburgers and they're like, no. You got to do like you do with our hamburgers and our big submarine sandwiches. You just got to pile it in this big old thing and then eat it.
Yeah.
And mix it all together. And then, yeah.
So Mexican food of all types is
okay. That's your favorite. Okay. That's good to know. That's very good to know. So you're from Monee.
I am.
And that is kind of the, not quite the tip of the 79th district that you're looking to represent. But it's pretty close. It's not far, right? Because it goes up to like Park Forest.
Yeah, it goes up to the southern part of Park Forest and Richton Park. And then as you go south, after that is University Park, a little bit of Crete, and then you hit Monee. And, we're sitting here in the city of Kankakee now, and it's about half an hour from the city of Kankakee to Monee. It's not that far. No. You can go from the city of Kankakee to far western Kankakee County, and it'd take longer than that. But it's a big district.
It is, if you think about it, because it pretty much goes, like Buckingham, and then up to Park Forest. Yeah. I think Buckingham is the furthest point south, isn't it?
And we're going to be close to it. We're going to be out walking in Braceville over the weekend. Okay. I mean, we're going to leave no stone unturned.
You got a lot of ground to cover.
District. Yeah. And when people talk about gas prices, the best way to find out the gas prices is to get a big district like this and keep driving around.
Then you figure it out pretty quickly, don't you? Yeah. So you're born and raised in Monee, or did you originally come from elsewhere?
So I was raised in unincorporated Crete. Okay. It's part of the 79th.
Yeah.
And so it's not in the municipality. We have houses that are far apart and lots of greenery, a lot of trees. We're right in front of a forest preserve. My parents still live there. My brother still lives there. And I went to the Crete Monee schools. So this is, basically eastern Will County.
Okay.
Is where we're originally coming from.
So how familiar are you with Kankakee County? I suppose if you weren't super familiar this last year or so, you've become very familiar with it, running for office. But yeah, I mean, growing up, did you end up spending a lot of time? Because I bring that up just because most of our listeners are from Kankakee County. Mm-hmm. And so I'm just curious what your ties are to Kankakee County.
Yeah, I've got family kind of throughout Kankakee County, and going back to my great-grandparents lived here for a very long time, and I was lucky enough to, when I was a very young child, they were still alive. And a lot of their, I guess they'd be my second cousins are still in the city of Kankakee, my aunts in Manteno. Manteno is split between this district and the neighboring district.
Yeah, you've got like a little bit of the western part of Manteno.
Yeah, it was not designed this way. They didn't draw it for me, but it was very nice that my aunt ended up being in the little bit of Manteno that's in the district.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
What a coincidence.
Yeah.
That's funny.
It's really neat. So, in Monee, there's not, we don't have a grocery store. There's a lot of...
Which is hard to believe there's still no grocery store in Monee.
Yeah, it's been a problem. most of the time we go grocery shopping at the Walmart.
Yeah, which is just up in
Richardson Park.
Yes, Richardson Park, yeah, which is not super far.
And then if you're feeling bougie, you go up to Pete's.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, or you might maybe go east and go to Waltz somewhere, right?
Yep. Yeah.
So,
but we definitely need a grocery store.
mm-hmm.
But there's a lot of reasons to drive south when you live in Monee.
Yeah. So I guess, going through real quick, kind of going through your childhood and then
Sure.
early adulthood and stuff like that. What is your background in?
So where do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean,
Well, I'll start with my parents real quick.
Okay.
My dad's a valve mechanic, and he's been doing that for 30 some years. My mom was trained to be a chemist and was a chemist for a few years until I was born. And then she decided to, be a stay-at-home mom, which is a bigger job than anything.
It really is. People think it's a walk in the park, and
It's not.
We all know it's not.
It is not. And, later on, my brother was having some difficulties in the public schools, and he was having some challenges, and my mom took him out and homeschooled him for years and years until we could mainstream him, get him back into the school system.
Were you ever homeschooled?
I was never.
Okay.
No, I was always in the public schools up until I went to college. But that's a lot of work.
Yeah.
That's a lot of work. Homeschooling, keeping yourself up to the standards, and then, being able to get them back into the regular school system in high school. That's an achievement.
I guess what I want to know is, where did you go to college? And then what did you end up getting into career-wise? And even now, what are you doing?
So I ended up going, after Crete-Monee High School, I went to the University of Chicago. And that's in the, south side of Chicago, Hyde Park, Woodlawn area. And, it's kind of interesting. When I was applying to schools, I applied to U of I as well. And because of the financial aid packages, U of I was much more expensive than the University of Chicago. And to me, it's terrible to think that our state school would be more expensive for somebody to go to than a school like the University of Chicago.
That is surprising, considering Chicago versus Champaign. I guess it's just the name, right? It's the name and the reputation.
Right. I guess so. And what kind of funding they get. Thankfully, the University of Chicago has had a lot of funders who have come through the years. They have a massive endowment. University of Illinois has to rely on, our state government. And we've had a lot of difficulties for years in making sure we're adequately funding higher ed and actually public education in general. But I was a history major in college. And I initially didn't know what I wanted to do, and I considered political science.
Okay.
But when I was in a political science class, and they said, well, what do you think if the situation looked like this, and a president was doing this, do you think that would be possible, and how would that play out? And I said, well, that did happen in 1916. And history is cheating in political science classes, I guess.
It really, yeah. If you think about it, it is. It's a branch of history, really.
Right.
Or it can be, depending on, I suppose, what you're doing with political science.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I really like history because there's nothing new under the sun.
Yeah.
And the more you dig and the more you learn, the more you can figure out how to handle situations today. And the pendulum swings back and forth in lots of ways. But history kind of will give you some tips on how to manage through situations now.
So you're really going to be honing in on that craft to get you through. If you make it through the election, you'd be really using that to your advantage.
Yeah, I hope to.
Yeah.
And really, one of the things that the University of Chicago is good at and kind of known for is just there's a word, rigor. And looking at issues and being able to kind of separate the noise from what's really happening and understanding looking at something with a really critical eye. Is it working? Is it not working? Rather than just relying on anecdote. The University of Chicago also, I got to mention this, is known for our commitment to free speech. And while other college campuses are going through areas where it seems like cancel culture is on the rise, or, some students aren't allowing some speakers on campus, the University of Chicago has been committed to free discourse. And, I'm really proud that I was kind of trained in that idea, because one of the good things about the podcast format is you can really poke at issues and talk about issues in depth. And if you're silencing any voices, you're not able to do that.
What did you do after you graduate then? Did you focus on political science then? And
I got lucky. So I ended up getting a nonpartisan internship. Well, it's called a fellowship, the Dunn Fellowship. At the time, it was totally merit-based, not based on any political anything. And I ended up getting placed in the governor's office, working in the press team. I'd never done communications before, and I had to learn by doing. So Governor Quinn was the governor at the time, and so I got in as this nonpartisan fellow in the middle of really interesting times in state government.
I was going to say, you walked in to a really interesting time in the governor's office.
I did, yes.
Right after Blago and everything.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
So this was 2013, so it was, near the end of his time in office, Governor Quinn's time of office. But there was a lot happening.
Oh, my gosh.
Marriage equality was just a few months after I got there. We passed it legislatively rather than by the courts. And that's something that I think is important, is rather than it just being a dictate from the court, it was something that we were able to do by voting by the legislature. And it was also an interesting time because the number of issues every day that we got to deal with on the communications team was so high. So every day was different, and I got to learn about issues from labor issues to social issues to economic issues. It ran the gamut of things that would come across through the communications team's kind of desk, I guess.
Is this where maybe politics started to become more of an interest to you, as far as like actually being in the middle of it instead of just being the observer and the studier? Like, was this when it kind of grabbed you, or did that not come until a little bit later?
Well, I think that actually came a little bit earlier.
Oh, okay. Before this.
And, I think before that, it was interesting to me in the sense of I remember sitting down with my grandfather, and he would shout out a number, and I would say what president it was.
Wow.
Things like that. And it was.
Can you still do that?
Well, don't try right now. But I might be able to do it.
I think the only one I know is the 1st and 16th, and then from there, I really don't. I really don't know. That's about it.
Reagan was number 40, so that's an easier one.
Okay.
So if you have to go back, where was he compared to?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I was trying to think of. I couldn't. That's about all I know.
I always get a little mixed up when you get, you get in the middle there with your Taylors and.
Oh yeah.
Millard Fillmore.
Yes.
I think he was number 13 though. That's a good one.
Oh, okay.
But so I was interested in kind of government and politics in that way, but this was really my first opportunity to see it up close and figure out what it's really like.
Okay.
And not only to kind of be amongst it, but to think critically about it. And there were a lot more laws passed in Springfield than I realized. Couldn't believe how many laws the governor was having to decide whether to sign or veto. And Governor Quinn was known for, he vetoed quite a few pieces of legislation.
I remember that.
And just the pace of it was incredible.
Yeah. So I guess getting into the meat and potatoes of your campaign, why you're running for the 79th district, this is not your first political office that you've sought or been in, correct? Like, this is not the first time. What's your previous experience?
Well, right now I'm a trustee in Monee Township. And Monee Township includes the village of Monee, the village of University Park, and kind of the Will County part of Park Forest.
That's a lot. I didn't realize that.
Yeah, it's quite a bit.
Yeah.
And it's the most grassroots form of government. You're really trying to make sure nobody falls through the cracks. And there's an emphasis on youth and on seniors. So, it's been important to me as a township trustee that we make sure that there's transportation for seniors to get to doctor's appointments and other necessities. We created a youth program, which, we got an award from the township officials of Illinois as it's being the best program in the state for youth. We really wanted, after COVID, not only do we have learning loss from those years when students weren't in the classroom, but we also have a lack of understanding of social cues and just how to be around people because they haven't had to be in a while.
Yes.
So we wanted to try to make sure that we had some instruction. We're not having big classes, but some instruction, interactive, some homework help, and then just some recreation so people can shoot some hoops and be around each other. And a nice byproduct is they're not other places, where they might be getting in trouble. They're in a safe spot here.
Yeah, or being around others that influence them
right
in a wrong way, negative way, whatever you want to call it, Mm-hmm. And get some of those endorphins going if, doing something positive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what else qualifies you for this position in the 79th district?
Well, before I was a township trustee, I was just a citizen. And there are people who have said that the highest office in the land is the office of citizen. And so there was an issue in our local school district where there's 4 communities, 2 communities of color, 2 that are majority white. University Park and Park Forest, they were trying to close down the 2 schools and then bus everybody into Cretan Monee. So they'd be disinvesting greatly from University Park and Park Forest. And I'd seen that movie before. So I went to the school board and I said, this plan doesn't make any sense. And, essentially they patted me on the head and said, well, we're elected. We know what we're doing. And I said, well, I think we need to put this to a referendum. I think we need to let the people decide whether these schools should say or not.
Would they have been able to make that happen without a referendum? Don't they have to have one to do something major like that?
Well, that was another reason why I wanted them to do it. In order for them to build a new school building, they would have to have a referendum. But they had this goofy plan, which they called the plan. Like there could be no other plan, which had basically a shell corporation build the building, and then the school district would just rent it. And that was their way of getting around the requirement for a referendum. And I know that's a lot of mumbo jumbo. It's very
I've never
technical.
Never heard of that until now.
And so I said, you need to put a question on the ballot, or we will. And I think they thought that was a false threat. I think they thought we were bluffing. They didn't realize that if you get 8% of the gubernatorial vote in any elected or any particular body signatures, that number of signatures, that you can put your own question on the ballot.
So you had to, so that's like a petition? Is that what you did?
So we did a petition drive and we got 1,200 signatures in that school district, put the question on the ballot. They were shocked when we went to go turn it in. They were like, wait, what are you doing? Well, the law says that you have to turn it in. And actually, here's an opinion from the state's attorney that says you have to accept this. So it ended up being on the ballot throughout the school district. And we educated people on what was happening. And at the end of the day, 80% of people agreed with us that those schools needed to stay. And that was the referendum passed in every area, not just in University Park and Park Forest.
Wow.
And that, to me, was a sign that we need elected officials who actually know what's happening on the ground. A lot of people who get elected, they think they're smarter than everybody because they won an election.
Yes.
But you need to really have your ear to the ground to figure out, what do people really want? How could they be so wrong when 80% of people throughout the district wanted to keep them there? And, that kind of what I call shoe leather democracy of going out and talking to people and handing out your cell phone number and figuring out what's happening, that's the kind of leadership and representation that I think that we need. And that's, whether you're in a school district or whether you're in a state rep district, whatever it is, you need to be able to have your ear to the ground, listening to things at all times. And the power comes from the people. And reform actually comes from the grassroots. The politicians, they'll learn about it eventually. But there's a lot of good ideas from people who are living their lives, and they just experience life and come up with, have you noticed that this just doesn't work? And, we learn a whole lot more from that than from any other method of, learning what's important.
Yeah. Before we move on, I am curious, though, if you could explain real quick what the benefit was, in your opinion, on keeping those schools open instead of busing them. Why was that a big deal? Having them bused to Crete-Monee instead of being in University Park and Park Forest?
So this was, there were a number of issues that I thought made it important. One was giving the voters a chance to make their voices heard. They didn't want to do that, and I think you're doing a disservice to the voters if you're taking that away. Two is that these schools are schools in the communities that, elementary schools that kids could walk to, and it creates a feeling of community and neighborliness that I think is really important as you're trying to raise kids, as you're trying to have pride in your town. Disinvesting from those areas would be taking the crown jewel of University Park out of University Park. It was interesting. Coretta Scott King Magnet School still is the name of the school in University Park. Best performing school in the district.
Wow.
And it's an international baccalaureate school. And they wanted to get rid of it because they said the facilities weren't up to par. Well, how did they get there? How did they get there? Maybe it was because we weren't investing in that facility. And you're investing in other ones. But there's a number of other repercussions when you take a school out of a community. Not just the lack of, not just changing the community immediately around it, but also they're important for programming in the community, doing things after school, having that facility there that can employ people who are local vendors that that get business from those facilities. So I think it was important to not take all of that investment out of those communities. And if you weren't to do that, you'd be putting a bunch of little kids on a bus going 45 minutes or something on a bus in the morning, because geographically it's a big area. Yeah,
because you're expanding your route on top of however big it already is, So
yeah, so there were a lot of reasons, and at the end of the day, I'm really proud that it was just people who sat around a kitchen table and said this isn't right, and got together and changed things.
Yeah. So your big key points that you're campaigning for right now is grow the economy, lower costs, and protect women's freedoms. So I feel like we should kind of hit those things, since those are the big things that you're kind of focusing on.
The other one I would say is cleaning up Illinois political corruption.
Oh,
I think that we're not talking about that right now, and we need to talk about it a whole lot more. We're in the midst of former Speaker of the House who's going to be on trial very soon, and actually, I don't know what day it is. He might be on trial today.
It's pretty. It might be a day of recording. I knew it was coming up soon. They had been doing the others involved with that case or cases.
Yeah,
So.
and people can't have faith in their government if they can't have faith that the people who are doing the government, doing the work, representing them, are honest. And that means making sure that we have real teeth to legislation when it comes to what our politicians are doing. One of the things that I would do if elected is sponsor conflict of interest voting legislation. So right now, that sounds kind of complicated, but right now, if you have a financial interest in something that is affected by the what you're voting on, you can still vote on it. You don't have to recuse yourself.
Yes.
And, that's something that I think everybody can agree isn't right.
No.
You shouldn't be profiting off of your votes.
Yeah. I guess just for example, let's say you own a road construction company and you're redoing roads for the state of Illinois. And let's say you're a representative or you're a senator, right? And you vote. You have the opportunity to vote on whether they accept the bid that your company has put or has given to the state. That's so pretty much what you're saying is you should not be allowed to vote on whether that passes or doesn't pass. You shouldn't be allowed to vote at all. Actually,
you shouldn't be able to vote to direct funding that's going to end up in your pocket.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So to put it simply, that's what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I've always respected the politicians that when those votes come up, they abstain themselves. They say, no, I can't vote in this matter because there's a potential conflict of interest. So, and right now there's no law saying that it's unacceptable. Mm-hmm. Is that what you're saying? So you would try to get some backing behind passing a law that says you can't do that?
Yep. Other states have it.
Okay.
And it's worked well in those other states, and I think Illinois needs it.
Okay.
I think our history shows it.
Are there? Yeah, no, that's for sure. What other things would you do what other things can happen to try and clean up what you're calling the corruption in Illinois?
Well, there's a lot of things.
Yeah.
One thing that bothers me is when it comes to money in politics. There's a lot of money. So if you live a life in Kankakee County or anywhere else, you've got to pay your utility bills. You do not have a choice. You got to pay for your water, and you got to pay for your electricity, and you've got to pay for your natural gas. Those utility companies are regulated by the state. They make profits, and then they donate those profits to politicians. And in other states, they say if you're a utility company, you're not allowed to do that. So I'm not taking any money from folks like that.
Any utility
companies. Yeah. And I think we need to seriously look at not allowing that to be the case anymore in Illinois.
And by the way, it is public record. People can see who's donated to your campaign.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, you can look and see anybody who's donated to me.
Yeah.
And, I think that's an important part of our system in Illinois is that all of the money going in and all the money going out, you can see. So you can see where I'm spending my campaign money and you can see where I'm getting my money.
Yeah. So how do we grow the economy in your eyes?
Well, there's lots of things that you can do. But let's just go back to one of the other points that you said, which is about the prices of everything.
Yeah.
So groceries, gas, utilities, prescription drugs. I think as I'm knocking door to door, these are the issues people are bringing up. And this is really tied to growing the economy. The state of Illinois needs to provide relief to folks. There is going to be a question on everybody's November 5th ballot for a property tax rebate from the state. And I definitely would urge everybody to vote yes on that question. The reason that property taxes are so high is because we need to invest more at the state level in education. If we do that, right now, the state's supposed to be funding it about 50%, a little bit more.
For schools.
For okay. Public schools. And, they're not hitting that mark by a long shot. So schools are having to use the property tax to make up the difference. So we need to invest more in public schools. But I'm really glad that this question is on the ballot so that people can make their voices heard and show them just how mad they are about their property tax bills. We have the second highest property taxes in the country, behind only New Jersey.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And if you look at the average property tax bill in the whole country, we're almost double that.
Yeah.
So
and you notice too, if you look at your tax bill, what are the big expenses? It's the school districts.
Mm-hmm.
So they're always at the top.
And I believe in quality education. I think all of us do. I don't mind paying some taxes if we're getting something for it. But I think a lot of people go, I just see my money going out of my wallet and I don't see anything new happening. And if you add to that, increased prices for, you feel like you're going broke just buying a Kit Kat bar.
That's very true. That's exactly how I feel.
Yeah. And, all of these things coming at the same time make it so difficult for people. And you see people who are working longer hours just to stay in the same place. You feel like you've been in a job for 29 years. This is a guy that I talked to at the doors. He's been in the same job for 29 years. He feels like he should be able to kind of take it a little easy. He's been working toward the American dream. And now he's like, I got to work this Saturday. I got to work this Sunday just to cover. I read somewhere that it was something like, if you want to have the same standard of living as you did in 2021, you have to make $12,000 more.
Yeah, I would say that's about how I feel too.
Yeah.
I feel like if I made about $12,000 more right now, I'd be okay.
Yeah.
But I'm not.
I didn't get a pay increase of $12,000. I don't know about you.
No, I did not. I did not. So going back to the property tax,
mm-hmm.
So the state of Illinois, let's say this referendum passes, they would rebate what portion on your property tax?
So it would not be a direct portion because you're not paying property taxes to the state.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So to get to the point of the referendum,
right?
What is that?
So it's really, we call it a rebate. It's probably more like a refund than a rebate. So what they're looking at is putting aside money from, income taxes that would be used for a property tax relief fund, which already exists. We actually have a property tax relief fund now, but we don't put money in it. So let's take some of that money, put it into that fund. Based on projections, what they would do is they would try to put a small surcharge on incomes per year that are over $1 million. And I think it's something like 77,000, something like that, people. And initially we were thinking that would raise $1.5 billion. It's like a 3% increase on people who make $1 million or more in 1 year. We found out that actually if you were to do that, it would raise $4.5 billion. And so back when the number looked like it was 1.5, you could give everybody a $500 check. And that would go a long way toward making sure that, you can take your kids to that soccer team.
Sure.
You can do a lot with that. Even though it's not a big percentage of your bill, it really helps your quality of life. Now that we found out it's 3 times as much as that, do you want to give all of that toward the property tax refund, which would, be a much larger refund, or should we take some of that and put it toward education? I think that's something that we need to figure out, since it would raise more money than we expected.
And so that kind of goes in with lowering costs, right? That kind of fits under that umbrella.
Right. And, one other thing, when it comes to providing relief for people, we didn't have a child tax credit in the state of Illinois for the longest time until just recently.
Just this last year, yeah.
And I was a big proponent of, us passing something like that, something modest, so that, it's expensive to raise kids right now.
You got that right.
And something modest to just help. So that did pass. I think we need to take a look at seeing how that works, how that affects childhood poverty, and maybe make that a little bit more generous in the future. There's also the Earned Income Tax Credit. The Earned Income Tax Credit, there's one at the federal level. It was Ronald Reagan was a really big fan of the Earned Income Tax Credit. And we found that all that money ends up going back into the economy when you have an Earned Income Tax Credit for people who are working and trying to get by and not making a whole lot of money. People should, go look at their Illinois income tax returns when they're filling them out and see if they qualify for the Earned Income Tax Credit or the Child Tax Credit, which just passed.
Yeah, and both of those can definitely help. Mm-hmm. So getting to growing the economy, what are some ways that you would propose trying to do that that would affect the 79th District and help the 79th District, the economy?
Mm-hmm. Well, there's targeted tax incentives. That's one of the things we can do. But let's just look back at what's happened over the past few decades in Kankakee County. We've missed out on a lot of opportunities. And a lot of those opportunities have ended up going to Will County, to Joliet.
You're talking about the Speedway, aren't you?
I am talking about the Speedway.
Although it's closed now, but it was still open for a good chunk of time there.
It was, yeah. And we need to be open to having investment in the 79th District and, make sure that we're not making it too difficult for folks to come. There's not, I think we need more state investment in the 79th District. We're not getting an awful lot right now. And, our state senator, Senator Joyce, he's doing a really good job of bringing money into the state, into the 40th Senate District, which half of that is the 79th State Rep District.
Yes, yeah.
But when it comes to actually making sure that we're targeting money toward the 79th District, that's a pot of money that exists in the state. And, we need to be getting some of that back to us. So that would help with updating our infrastructure. If you have updated infrastructure, then it'll be easier to have more load on those bridges. And, one of the reasons that Will County has ended up getting so much investment is because they invested in becoming a transportation hub. So Will County's population went up. People talk about people leaving the state of Illinois. Will County's population went up, and that was because of investment in transportation. And that's roads and bridges, and I think that we need to look at doing that. Now, I don't want us to lose our character. That's the first thing people will say.
That's the big argument, right? Is, well, we don't want to grow exponentially large because then yada yada happens. Mm-hmm. So, but there has to be a fine line, is kind of what you're saying.
Right. There does. Yeah. There does. And, I think it's easy. This is why I like the podcast format, because it's easy to say, oh, no, we just need to invest, or, oh, no, we just need to protect our farmland, because we need to do both. We need to be able to walk and chew gum at the same time. And that's absolutely possible. I think that you're seeing in, Bradley, Bourbonnais, you're seeing a lot of change right now. there's more that can be done too.
What are some last key points that you yourself want to get out there about your qualifications that you feel you're qualified for this office?
Yeah. Well, I think through my experience at the state level, my experience as a local elected official, and the work that I've done just as a everyday citizen, I was raised to be a good neighbor. And I was raised to fight for what's right. And those are the qualities that I want to bring to Springfield. So I have the experience to make change, the experience to speak truth to power, and the doggedness and the tirelessness to make sure that we get it done. We can't just rest on our laurels. And a lot of people get elected and they become part of a club. And I don't want to be part of the club. I want to be a real, true representative of the people. And it might sound cheesy or cliche, but that's how I've lived my public life. And that's how I want to continue to represent this area. There's a lot of issues that people aren't paying attention to because you hear the loudest voices. You hear the extremes on the left. You hear the extremes on the right. Most people are in the middle, trying to live their lives, trying to live the American dream and raise their kids. And they don't care about all that craziness. What they want is common sense. So I want to be a voice, a tireless and dogged voice for common sense in the state legislature.
Okay, well, Billy Morgan, thank you so much for coming by.
Thank you for having me.
And if people want to get more information about your campaign, they go to billymorgan.com.
Yep.
I know you're on Facebook as well.
Instagram,
of course, too. So anything else you want to? I know we like I said, we could go on forever. There's lots to talk about.
We could. Well, I want to thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course.
It's important that we have dialogues and get the chance to figure out who our elected officials and who our candidates are. You can get a sense of who someone is by how they think and how they talk. And you can't get that from just a piece of mail that you get in your mailbox.
Yes, absolutely.
And I got to say, I got a piece of mail from myself yesterday that said, remember to vote March 19th.
Oh, no. Well, that's embarrassing.
So I don't know why it took them that long to get it to me.
Oh, my gosh.
But I got it last night, and I think I voted for myself. But
oh, man. A little late.
It was a little bit late.
A little late there.
It was a little bit late, but, the whole crux of my career so far has been everyday people making a difference, democracy at its finest. So I will just ask everybody, whether you're going to vote for me or not, to get out and vote and make your voice heard. Of course, I would like for you to vote for me. I think that I'm a great candidate to represent this area, and I promise that I'll fight for you whether you voted for me or not. But vote. Make sure your voices are heard.
Okay. Thank you so much for your time, Billy.
All right. Thank you.
Best of luck.
Thank you.
That wraps up our conversation with Billy Morgan, candidate for Illinois State Representative for the 79th District. We've heard about his background, his priorities for the community, and the changes he hopes to bring if elected. As always, we encourage you to stay informed and engaged with the candidates running in your district. We will be releasing an episode with Morgan's opponent, Jackie Haas, in the next few weeks, so be sure to look for that. I'm Jake Lamore. Thanks for tuning in, and be sure to check out more special election episodes of Kankakee Podcast as we continue to highlight important local stories and voices.